So I was looking at this picture and I'm thinking, there's something missing here. And then I realized what it was. I was putting down large brush areas, but I want to put in Luna's eyes and I think also her nose, because they are the bits that you're going to be looking at the most. So let's put those in now to a fairly finished state, and so then I can balance things around them. What brush do I have? I'll go for DC Simple Round for now. I will come back to my raw sienna, make sure I'm on the right layer. Yes, I am. Opacity, let's set this to what it's on, 18%. Brush size is, actually, come on, let's make the opacity a bit bigger, 40%. And let's start putting down some eye detail. Brush size a little bit smaller, and I'm going to make the top of Luna's eyes quite a bit darker than the bottom to get the impression of shadow. And let me warn you from now, these are going to look quite soulless, but when I put the highlights in, the eyes will suddenly spring to life. I need some darker bits around the bottom. That's getting quite saturated, but what I will do is I will come to my burnt sienna. I want to add a little bit of red around here. Remember, I'm playing games with the colours. Maybe a little bit brighter, slightly different colours in different areas, because I want to see how this goes. I'm going to swap my brush to Simple Round Deep because that will give me a stronger effect. I'm going to come to, let's try this yellow ochre because it's slightly less intense or saturated than the sienna colour. And because I'm using the deep brush, the Simple Round Deep, I can get these darker colours. And let's add a little bit more deepness just to some other areas, these lighter areas. I will come to sepia and I'll make my brush size very small, but maybe a little bit more saturated, opacity 35%. Because I notice with these, one thing that gives the eye its character are these little bits just around the outside of the eye, so I want to put those in. I want to make the very edge of the eye against the black quite deep. Let's make my brush size a bit smaller. I'm scribbling rather than painting at the moment. I don't want to do that. Brush size back to being small again, because again I want to put in these effects, these little wiggly lines which form part of the iris. Oh, one thing I do want to do, choose Payne's Grey, come back to DC Simple Round, because there's a very definite bit around the pupils, probably where the iris is thinner, where I'm getting a definite blue effect there. I want that. Okay, I'm starting to get there. Just for a second, I will turn off the sketch layer because that light blue is interfering with what I'm seeing just a little bit. Now I'm going to come to my eraser, watercolor brushes. Let's try DC Soft Wash. I've set it small, what, 2%. The opacity is pretty low, what, 36%. Because one thing I've noticed is, just around the edge of the iris, you do get this slightly lighter area, which I want to put in. I think the edge of the iris, I don't know whether it's all animals or just cats or just Luna, but they are slightly curved and that can catch the light. So let's put that in. I'm going to come back to my paintbrush. I'm going to use sepia again, because now that I've got rid of that sketch, I just want to bring the very edge of the eyes so that they blend in a little bit more with the black around the outside of the eye. Right, come back to my crunchy smudge, make the brush nice and small because that's too hard a border between that sepia I just put down and the rest of the eye. I'm starting to get there. It's looking a little bit darker than I intended, but come to the layers panel. I want you to come to the stripes layer and I want you to add another layer on top, and I will call this highlights. What brush shall I use for this? Again, I'll use DC Soft Wash again, and I'm going to choose, I'll come to my classic palette and I'm just going to drag right up to the top left to choose white. Because what I want to do with these eyes, which are looking a little bit dead at the moment, I'm going to put in a highlight. One eye and the other eye. When you do your highlights, I know I'm not doing it exactly as I see it in the picture, but in general, you want your highlights to be crossing that border between the colours of the iris and the dark of the pupil. That really helps sell the idea that this is a highlight. Maybe put a tiny bit just down the bottom as well. Come back to my smudger and maybe just soften that in one or two areas. Let's zoom that out a little bit on that. A little bit of smudging just on this left eye. Now, take a look before and after. Without the highlights, looking very dead. With the highlights, all of a sudden, you've got an eye that looks much more alive. Now, what about this nose? I'll come to my eraser. I just want to get rid of those colours that are spilled out. But to do that, I need to come back to my paint layer because that's where those paints are. Get rid of them there. Let's come take a look at the nose. And for this, I think the obvious choice is, this is Indian red, I think. Yeah, that's going to be the best choice for this. I will come back to my symbol round deep because that will make things darker quicker. The brush size is pretty small. Let's make it a tiny bit bigger. My opacity is low, 35%. So let's just start colouring in this area. That could do with a little bit darker again. And I can see just towards the middle of the nose, towards the top, that's where the lighter areas are. So I will work around that, but make the other areas darker. And I think this colour I'm using, Indian red, that's the right colour to use for this. I'm getting some, well, just the effect I want. I'll come to my smudger, maybe blend those in a little bit. Leave the highlight there. Then just start to add deeper and deeper colours just in the shadow areas, just to give a certain amount of form to this. Maybe just a touch of deeper just around the border with the black, because again, I don't want this sitting on top of the black. I want it interacting with the black in some way. Okay, those are my two detailed areas. And that's going to help me make some better decisions, I think, about the rest of the picture. Before I do, though, look, I'm not particularly happy. I think I've made the irises too dark. I'm so keen to show you the various different effects that I think I've overdone that a little bit. Maybe I can come to my eraser. Soft wash is selected. That's good. I just want an even wash. I want this set very low, 15%. Brush size, should we try 8%? And I just want to knock back just some of these darker colours, maybe not in the top area, but the bottom area. Yeah, that works. Overall, I think I've sloshed on the paint quite a bit, and so it's looking a bit darker than I would like. So while I'm here on this layer and I've got my erase tool selected, I'm going to come maybe to the nose and just start making some brush strokes there. And taking back some of the paint, just in certain areas, just around the side of the face. Let's zoom out a little bit so I can see what I'm doing a bit more clearly. I think the side of the ear as well, that could do with something a little bit lighter. Also, I'll make my brush size smaller, maybe make it a little bit, opacity 20%, size 4. And I'm going to come to these areas in between the stripes on the forehead, because there's some very definite light areas. They suddenly got quite dark, quite fast. So I'm looking at my picture and I'm taking back and reclaiming some of these lighter areas. If you're a very traditional watercolorist, you might be turning around and saying, you shouldn't do that. You always work light to dark. To which I would say, well, actually, you can buy special scrubbing brushes where you scrub over the paint that you've already put down. Then you stamp down pretty hard with some kitchen paper or something like that. And yes, you can do what I'm doing now. You can start to fade away the paint to reveal lighter areas. It's a very common technique. Done it myself plenty of times. Sometimes while saying, I shouldn't have put the paint down that strong, so I'm trying to rescue a painting. But in the case of this, yes, we're emulating watercolor paints. But don't make the mistake that we all sometimes make of thinking, well, I'm painting using what are called watercolor paints and I want a watercolor effect. So I will make my process, painting light to dark, not using gouache to create white lines. You can't get into the mindset of, I will paint in a very traditional way. This is digital. Digital tools require you to work slightly differently. And not least amongst that is the simple fact that you can erase every bit as efficiently as you can make marks. And that's important and necessary. Let's take a look around the back area. Yeah, let's do this. I will stop now and I will carry on doing this in the next lesson because I'm starting to get into the territory of using some of the tools which I think are going to make your life interesting, to say the least. And I did promise myself I would do that in the next video. So yeah, I will stop now. I'll carry on in the next one.